In this episode, we meet Tova Averbuch. We know each other for a long time as friends, but also as colleagues in several networks. I know you introduced open space to Israel, and we were also in the summit co-creating a world that works for all. The whole idea for this podcast series was born there. So welcome, Tova. I'm very happy that you're here and that you would like to share some of your experiences on what works or what didn't.
Maybe I'll say a few sentences about myself, and then whatever we will talk about will tell who I am or how I work and how it relates to what interests you, and please lead me into it. I think level playing field is my middle name. And by profession, my formal description of my profession is organizational behavior, organizational development consultant. Sometimes in the 80s, while I was working mainly with high tech, I came to the realization that the paradigm that we're working with, the Western medicine paradigm, that organization approached me with what they would call illness or problem. And I would come and do diagnosis, prognosis, and then work out the delta between whatever is health and how to get there, and an intervention to minimize this delta between health and the current situation. And because I was working with high tech industry in with organizations that were rapidly changing and multi-technology. After we finished the diagnosis, after a month or two, which is a short time, the organization doubled itself, it tripled itself. And I said to myself, it's not that we're not trying, we're just not using the right target. And even then, before I knew anything about the methodologies that I met later, when I went on a search to find ways to think and do
Yeah.
that wouldn't sound fake, I knew that we're losing a lot of wisdom by labeling the people who work in the organization as subjective. So we cannot ask their opinion because they have vested interest. But then we are losing their intimate knowledge, their passion, their will. So I was then looking for, I believe, what you call level jumping. So this is one reason why I'm here. And the other one is that I found out that everything you call me to do or I call you to do is interesting for the both of us. So I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, you have a vast experience with many organizations and with many circumstances. What I would be very happy with if you could share some of your experiences of what worked or what didn't work on creating a level playing field. So how can we be more in mutuality and shared responsibility?
Okay. I shall speak about myself as a participant and then about myself as a facilitator or as a consultant.
Yeah, please do.
It's a different perspective of trying to bring answer or knowledge from my experience to your question. As I started saying, I knew that the paradigm, which was a psychodynamic paradigm, and that I was working with till the 80s, was not working in the places that I had to work with that were rapidly changing. So I moved with my family to the US and I was looking for something else. And one day way led onto way. And I found myself in open space, 4-day open space that I attended because when I read the description of open space, something in me was so excited. All my body went lit up, and I didn't know why, but I had the feeling that this is what I was looking for. And that specific open space was the 4-day planning session, a yearly planning session of a community of clinical psychologists who work to rehabilitate the Chernobyl community in Russia. There were both Russian and American psychologists, and I felt I must attend, but I was embarrassed to call. Eventually, it was too strong to resist my passion. And like pattern recognition, that the open space is what I was looking for as a new paradigm or as an alternative paradigm to the way that I worked with 20 years as a consultant. So I called, and a woman answered. She was a secretary or something, administrative position. And I told her, listen, my name is so and so. I'm Israeli. I'm for a temporary time in the US. And I'm not a clinical psychologist, neither American nor Russian. And I don't believe I will work with the Chernobyl community. But I read about it and I feel a strong will to come. And I'm an organizational consultant. Maybe I could be of any kind of use and maybe bring some wisdom from what I know. But it seems that I'm not the population that you're looking for. And what she answered, she said, great, we'll be very happy to have you. Because if you want to come, we're sure you're bringing something that is precious to us too. Don't be so apologetic. And my head flew out of my body because the way that she reacted was totally the opposite of everything I knew about who is in and who is out in a certain context. In the way that I was working, I was out of context. I was a stranger. They shouldn't let me in. And this went on and on and on. And I will give two more examples so you all know what I'm talking about. And I was surprised to my bones. And it was an experience, a visceral experience, more than a cognitive realization. That what happens to me is that my heart opens, that I feel gratitude, that my desire to be there and contribute becomes even larger. And she said, this is great. We don't want only people that think like us and are us. We want people that can contribute things that we don't have. That was a totally different attitude. Now we're starting. I'm there. There's this woman. She's a graphic designer and she's the facilitator. And I'm saying to myself, they must be crazy. What do they mean she's a graphic designer and she's a facilitator? Facilitator in the Western world should be an expert, should learn facilitation, should be da 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 da. I had so many shoulds in my head, and I was sitting there, partially open, partially judgmental. And I see that she's doing everything that I was taught and teaching by then not to do. For instance, I was in a small group. She was sitting next to me. She turns to me and says aloud, Tova, you're such a wise woman. Because I said something that comes from my facilitation skills. So she was impressed and she said, Tova, you're such a wise woman. And this little voice in me said, is she crazy? She will create jealousy in the room. You don't say such a thing to a participant. It's a professional. Da 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 da. 1,000 times a day. By the end of the day, when the agenda was full, when the conversations were rich, and I felt invited everywhere I went, and so did everybody else, I said to myself, I don't know what they're doing. It's very different from everything I know, but it works beautifully well. It is something, it's a year program for these people to execute when they go home. And it's theirs, it's not hers. She's enabling it. That's what she's doing. And so I went to her and I said, my name was Carolyn Kinsman. Carolyn, I decided I want to carry your suitcase. Where is your next open space? I want to leave. And she said, no, You don't have to carry my suitcase. There's a book, a guidebook by Harrison Owen. Buy it, read it, do it. And I said to myself, first the judgment. How come it could be so easy? Maybe it's not professional enough. But then the surprise of the generosity of them. You don't need me. Go for it. The encouragement. In the world I came from then, everything you knew, you held on close to your chest. You didn't share because of competition, because of you worked hard to create your knowledge. And here there was sharing, and everything was out in the open and transparent. And my body and soul just loved it. I felt like a plant that was dried for years, that was sipping all of that. So for me, a level field is that.
Okay, beautiful. And that is one thing. What triggered you in the invitation? Something in the invitation made you call.
I was already more than a year in the US. When I came to the US, I didn't know if I will find what I'm looking for. And I didn't even have a good description of what I was looking for. I knew what didn't work. I moved all my family with two adolescents, and I felt very, I should find something. I came to find something, and I didn't. And I was doing all kinds of workshops. And one of the women who was with me in one of the workshops, she said, I saw this, and if I understood well what you're looking for, please look into it. And that was the Chernobyl thing, what I told you before. And then in the frame, there was open space technology is a methodology that you invite everyone and they co-create their agenda and they spell a lot of self-organization. I think that the self-organization, or there is something in the language of most of the people who open spaces that is level fit. I don't know how to say that there's no hierarchy in the invitation, that the invitation itself is playful, is that says, don't hesitate. Come on.
So you felt welcome.
At least to ask, And then I felt welcome to come. And then I felt welcome not to know anything, not to be anything, just to be myself, which is so relieving. And the most relieving thing for a person like me that I have tons of ideas that I get very excited, is that in open space technology, you cannot be too much because you go from one group to the other. If it's too much for you, you can walk out. It regulates itself in a way that no one needs to be ashamed of how they are. If they are very excited people or low key people, everything is needed and everything could be moving to the benefit of the person and the whole. So I love
Yeah.
it.
Then you learned open space technology and you took it home to Israel. And what happened?
And I and maybe I'll give you the rule. If you will want a story, I'll give you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I'll start with the generalization. I believe that a space that's not open, no matter what the methodology is, on a level mutual shared leadership, if the purpose is not issue that brings us together, is not urgent,
Mhm.
we don't share common purpose to understand it, to make it better, whatever. When I was coming as a consultant to any kind of community or organization that was really in distress, it was theirs. It wasn't mine. I was there like a midwife to help them give birth, but the pregnancy, the child, the pain was theirs. What I had to offer that I've been to birthing process. I could help them breathe. I could give a hand. I could soothe their forehead. You know, I could be in what I call Brit. Brit is a covenant with them. I won't leave you alone. We'll be in this together. But
Yeah.
I wasn't confused. It's not my child and it's not my pain. And when the organization is in distress and the preparatory process the sponsor or whoever originates this meeting really understands and really is willing to share the leadership, at least for the time it will meet. The leadership to explore, the leadership to come up with new ideas, the leadership to take it forward for this. I don't know if it's few months, few weeks, few days, I don't care. If this happens in real distress and people can choose if to come or not to come, and people can choose to be in a preparatory committee, in leadership, whatever, it works beautifully.
What I hear you say is that it's very important that people can choose to come.
Extremely. And that they feel passionate to influence and impact and solve an urgency over the issue, that they care, that they love whatever it is, that they're really invested in what we're trying to do.
Yeah. In my experience, the formal leaders, they are often very scared to let go of that power and invite people in a way that they can choose to come or not. What's your experience?
It's the same. And I, when I'm teaching, many times they say the same thing that you're saying. I think that it's very natural. I know that when I was sponsoring processes, I needed to control some of it because I wanted to be sure that it will be productive, that it will be valuable, that it will not be. I had all reasons why I need control. So personally, I have a lot of respect for managers who need this control because many times what I read into it is responsibility. And that's where I start with them. I say, I see that you feel responsible for the results. I'll be very empathic. I don't have any criticism for that. It's like if I stick to the giving birth metaphor, I will not be judgmental of a woman giving birth that she's in pain. That when I say something, she said, "No, but I don't want to do what you're saying because it hurts me. I won't judge her. I would be accepting, and I would ask, so what is it that you need? What would make you feel safe? Where do you want me to touch your back to support you? Whatever, you know."
Yeah, yeah.
The same thing when not every time I succeed because I'm just a human being, but whenever I succeed to be in this state of mind fully, and usually what I'll say, listen, we don't have to do that. I think that to share leadership, you must have a good reason. It's a process that takes a lot of time, a lot of mental, emotional energy. It gives a lot of promise. I want you to persuade me why we need it. Maybe we don't need it. If you have a good idea of what to do and how it should look like, so it's a totally different process. So maybe the question is how to implement it. Okay, so if the question is how to implement it, why do we need this process? Yeah, because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I believe that the worries and the apprehensions are information that we're not hearing. And if they're heard, they transform from worries and apprehensions to information that inform the decision and we can go on. That's what I learned in my 40 years in practice.
But it requires a different attitude, not to be a consultant giving advice,
Right.
but more in the attitude like you described it as a midwife. Okay, where is your pain and what do you need?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, even if I don't give advice, there was time that I had a will or a wish for the organization. And I had to lose that as well. It wasn't what I want for them. And like a mother, you can want the best for your children. No. So I started asking myself, what does the situation want or need of me? I can give you an example,
Yes.
and it's not always very pleasant. I was invited by a startup of 450 people, high-tech industry, 10-year-old startup that was still not selling in the market and having enough money. They had good technology. They were trusted by the investors that kept investing. And the two, not both of them they were leaders of the organization, like two in a box. Okay, one was more in the technology and the other was more in the commerce, but they were running the organization really together, like double CEO. And they said, it's a year now that we're looking for a consultant. So I said, this sounds like quite a long time. We started to look for a consultant to help us create an organizational structure that will support us. So I said, okay, why did you come to me? And they said, we heard that you will not give in to us and that you will not give up with us. So I said, okay, I can relate to that. And it gave me the legitimacy to work with that. And I remember they were very, very good hearted people. And they didn't want to offend anyone that was working 10 years with them by saying, you will not report to me, you will report to 3 levels under me. So that's why they could not decide on an organizational structure, or really, there was an ambivalence there. Remember, I told you that for me, the covenant, the knowing that I'm with them, that I'm not against them, and we are, all of us, um, work for a purpose that is collective, but at the same time, takes care of each individual as well. So I told them, listen, before we start working on that, because you are founders, it happens many times that you will find out, or a collective process will find out, that the leadership should change. So I'd like to have an hour or 2 or 3 with each one of you, or with both of you, to explore, if so happens, what is your next step in life that you really love. They thought I was crazy. And I said, I'm not going further. I'm not meeting anyone of your management. If I don't know that you have a good answer for yourself. So they say, okay, we'll have an hour or 2 with her and we shall see. And after that, I knew that there is some safety for them as people, as individuals. And I didn't think of it this way, but I think I gave them the example that in my values, like in theirs, people matter. You don't do any changes you want without thinking what it does to people. Then we went on, and they had to leave their leadership position. Not right away, because the person that they wanted to hire, whatever, there were difficulties. But eventually they did.
I think it's a great example of taking the formal leadership very seriously.
Yeah.
Not being judgmental and not giving advice with an attitude that I know what is good for you from my extensive experience, like often consultants are tempted to do, or even asked to do. They're paid for it. Tell me what to do. Maybe it may happen that you have to change your leadership and go somewhere else and leave the baby you put in on the world to someone else.
Yeah. You know, when people ask me, who's your client? When, consultant ask me, oh, who is your client? For me, the system is my client,
Yeah.
and every part of it. The future system, the present system. So the way I see client is in a very wide way.
I'm curious, the two CEOs you mentioned, did they start that open process or what happened?
Yeah, they did. It was the first time that I did organizational structure in a participatory process, because most of the people said, are you crazy? People, it's their position. It's super subjective in a power structure, and they're going to decide what will happen. And it was like a waterfall type of process, because they said, we're not used to speak to a lot of people. Let's start with a small group. So I said, fine, who's your small group? And they said, write me name. I want to know them. So they wrote, and they said, no, this one must come. And this one was with us from the beginning. And this one, they came up with 22 people. And I said, okay, we can start with this. A 2-day open space. They wanted to speak about structure. I say, I cannot speak about structures if we don't speak about strategy. Structure is means to an end. So we started with this, and we found out that the business model doesn't work. You start with something and you find out something else. What we did, because they felt so much guilt to the 450 who were not invited, in the evening when we finished, I sat with one of the managers and we created a report that was sent to all the managers in the company. We had a 2-day open space about this and that, and decided that the task forces that are built are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you feel moved to join any of these task forces, please do. So 80 new people joined the process. There were people who were insulted and not insulted, so they spoke with them personally and took care of their feeling, the explanation of why they chose to do it this way. They have their limitations, whatever. Is there anything that they want to influence and they didn't have the opportunity to? Please do now, whatever. It's not too late. So after these 6 weeks, the task forces finished, whatever. They came back to an even larger audience. And what I asked them to do, each task force had to report for 5-10 minutes, the topic, the conclusions of what they offer to the management. The management was to decide, but it was all in transparency. And what they know, what they're sure of, and what questions they have that they're not sure, they're hesitant. And there were discussion groups about the topics that they wanted to be discussed. 2 weeks later, the management decided whatever, but it was totally informed and created at least by 80 people. So when they started the new organizational structure, there were 80 people that knew exactly what it means out of 450. So it didn't take forever to implement it.
It's a beautiful example. And what I take from it is also who do you see as the client? It's the whole organization and maybe even wider. And another thing that comes up, you wrote a beautiful book about entering and contracting and the initial stages. But I hear in your story also the widening of the circles. You start with the 2 CEOs maybe and connect with them, and then the smaller circles of 20-something people, and then the 80-something people, and then the whole bunch of 400.
It's so true. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. And also in the book, The Widening of the Circle. Why? Because every person that I meet for the first time, for them and me, it's a beginning. The beginning is a process that keeps on recreating itself all the time in emergent processes. The beginning never stops. I don't come and say, okay, I'm your consultant at that time. No, I say something about the way that I work, I ask them who they are, what's the question that is most important to them, where their passion lies, everybody, again and again and again. Otherwise, you don't have those people in authentic leadership and authentic involvement and really passionate to speak from what they care for. The book that you said, I call it initiating and inviting generative change. Because in generative and emergent change, you initiate, you have a plan, but then you invite, and sometimes it happens, and sometimes one shared leadership. But there's one more thing that I'm afraid to forget. Yesterday, I was interviewed to a podcast in Israel, and the interviewer told me, okay, so it's very easy in systems that are open to shared leadership. But what do you do in hierarchical organizations? And when the leaders do not want to share their power, I found out that the more the organization or the institution is hierarchical, it's easier to introduce a level playing field. Why? Because they're not afraid that they will lose the hierarchy. Like I worked with the Air Force in Israel. I'll give you an example. It's a good example. I told them we had to create an invitation. So they wrote something. It sounded very formal, and there was the signature of the head of the airplane. So I said, if I receive that, do I have a choice not to come? They said, no, 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 no. If the head, no, 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 I signed it. It's an order. It was my second open space. So I said, listen, I don't know what to say, but I think that there is no way that open space spirit will show up, because open space spirit will show up only if there is a choice. So I need your help. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I think maybe we cannot open space in the Air Force. No, no, I didn't know that this is the best selling technique. You don't tell pilots that they cannot do something if you're. No, I'm just, I'm getting, but I really genuinely said, I don't know. I don't know how to solve it. And I was so much in distress that I took a chair by me and I said, I, Tova, understand what you're saying. But here, open space says they're not coming. It was an empty chair. Like the open space spirit said, I'm not coming if there's no choice. I cannot show up. So they said, wait a minute. Eventually, what they did, they created an invitation that had the shape of a phantom plane with many colors, and they signed the names and the ranks of every 122 people who participated in the preparatory committee, the head of the da 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 da. So maybe it was still in order, but people knew that it's something else. That the spirit of participation, at least, will be totally different. That they can show up on a playing level field.
Yeah, it's a great example. Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
Yeah.
We don't promise anything. But in 3 days, you can change any point of view of any rank officer. You can change their hearts, you can change their mind, and then we restore hierarchy. Because I personally, I don't have ideology that is pro equality all the time. I think that many times it's a waste of time. I don't mind to be led by someone who has the knowledge on things that repeat themselves. And I don't care if it's done this way or the other way. It's when we don't know, when we're looking for a new way, when we're in a singular situation, that you need all of us as equals.
Yeah. And what I hear you say, I think, is that the top leaders, they still have some control in setting the boundaries on how long the open space will be and the way of inviting and also framing the whole topic or field. And of course, there can be some starting points they decided or beforehand. That's correct?
Yeah, yeah, because they are the only ones who are responsible to the board. So I think it's only fair if they have all of what you just described.
Some great examples, Tova, and I recommend the book you wrote. Maybe you can repeat the title once more.
Initiating and inviting generative change.
So thank you, Tova, for being part of this journey and for sharing your stories.
And thank you for creating this platform, doing it again and again and again.
Thank you for listening. A new episode will be posted every 2 weeks with new exciting stories on how to create a level playing field for collaboration. I hope you will be back. Together we can make a difference in the world.